The Earth is our world, and it is changing. What we call our history, or the history of civilization, was developed during a tiny part of the long dawn of humanity. This takes us back in time more than 2 million years. Our world has been a paradise of easy living for some parts of those 2 million years, such as we presently enjoy. Our world has also been a harsh place for most of that time, with so much of it covered with snow and ice that the ocean levels had dropped by 400 feet. Only a few people had been able to survive through the harsh times, so that less than 10 million people emerged from the last ice age period. At the present time, as our world is about to become an ice planet again in the near future, we find ourselves challenged to get ready for the harsh times ahead. And this with a 7 billion world population, and to prosper therein. The problem that we face is that no one remembers the harsh times when our home had been a virtual ice planet, not even the last one that ended only 12,000 years ago, which will be upon us again in the near future. Too few had survived to tell us about it. No written languages had existed for their messages to be conveyed. We can't even imagine those harsh times that were quite unlike the paradise world that we now presently enjoy, but which is now fast coming to a close. This means that without historic experiences, our future unfolds as a puzzle. Oh yes, we can look at ice samples that have been drilled out of glaciers and speculate about what had caused the evidence. Such speculation abounds, but what is the truth? We need to discover the truth urgently, since our world, the Earth, is about to become an ice planet once again in the not-so-distant future. To discover the truth, science offers the only pathway that we can have to ascertain what we will face in the times ahead, and how soon this will be, and what foundation we must create in order to turn the future ice planet Earth into a still richer paradise than we presently have. The evidence that science provides is imperative. Science enables us to read the writing on the wall. The evidence is measurable and observable. It is historic in nature, and it is also expressed anew. It is both astrophysical and terrestrial. Its consequences are already affecting us. We can reach into the past and into the future and draw them together to determine the present. We can do this by discerning principles that no eye has ever seen, but which the mind can behold and understand, and can recognize their consequences and potentials for our living. The astrophysical move is on. The ice planet Earth is no longer a hypothetical issue of academic concerns related to distant times. The transition is already in progress. It is happening in the present time frame. We cannot get away from it, not really. With the cultural history of China being one of the oldest in the world, China may also have the potential to link us forward into the times ahead. We need this potential and need to develop it, because the Earth has already begun to move towards the phase shift that leads to an ice age world with an uncertain future that no one has experienced before, nor is willing to face. We need to prepare our world for what only science can ultimately reveal, even while the extent of the science challenge is far from being understood itself, and the little that is understood is so scary to contemplate that we'd rather run away from it, from the challenge, than face it. Indeed, it would be scary if we, humanity, hadn't discovered the power within us as human beings to meet the tallest challenge with intelligence, technologies, economic processes, and productive cooperation. With this power that we have the potential at hand to turn the harshest ice world into the richest paradise, far richer than anything we presently have. So let us celebrate our power, and with it celebrate ourselves, and as we do so, let us engage one another to meet the Ice Age challenge that no one can meet alone, nor survive standing alone. China stands at the leading edge on the path of developing the human power. It stands at the leading edge with its commitment to advancing worldwide cooperative economic development. This means that the highest form of cultural optimism in the world presently flows from China. Let me warn you at this point that this video does not present a mythic tale, nor an apocalyptic tale. The Ice Challenge is neither mythic nor apocalyptic. It is real, it is in progress, and it is a challenge that can be met. The Ice Age challenge poses the greatest scientific, technological, humanist, economic, and political challenge in the entire history of humanity. The Ice Age challenge also poses a cultural challenge of the highest order. It takes beauty, music, poetry, song, literature, and art to inspire the human soul to shine and to master the infinite. With these, we will win. Without them, we will fail. But why should we fail? We are standing today on the richest platform that has ever been developed, or at least we have created the beginning of it. A grand beginning was staged in Beijing on the 14th and 15th of May in 2017 in the form of the Belt and Road Forum that has been referred to as Making History. It has also been referred to as a civilization-wide project for the future of mankind and a phase change for humanity. With this type of beginning, we cannot fail to win. One might call the initiative a powerful start in the right direction. It is that because it reflects one of the greatest principles of civilization, the principle of the Peace of Westphalia. In 1648, the discovered principle was termed the principle of the advantage of the other. The nations of Europe had been fighting each other for 100 years. No one had gained anything thereby. Half of the population had been murdered in the process. So the leaders said to each other, "Let's turn this thing around. Instead of killing one another, let's promote what is of the advantage of the other, and thereby gain peace that we all need and must have to be able to develop ourselves as human beings. And this they did. This principle that the leaders had committed themselves to in 1648 had ended 100 years of war at that time. The treaty became known as the Treaty of Westphalia. Its principle still stands as a foundational principle of civilization. In China, the basic principle was put on the map again, prominently and formally in 2013 as the win-win principle that stands behind China's Belt and Road Initiative that promises to uplift the world. The initiative is modeled after the historic Silk Road, by land and by sea. The Silk Road had developed the regions along its path. It had created a belt of prosperity. The modern expression of the Westphalia principle in 1648, in the form of continent-wide cooperative universal economic development, is what humanity urgently needs as a starting platform for building itself a new world in the tropics. The future of humanity depends on its ability to relocate itself into the tropics before the Earth becomes an ice planet again. This means that the future of humanity is decided in the present. It is decided with the building of new infrastructures in the tropics for meeting the Ice Age challenge that already looms on the horizon. Anything less than the widest implementation of the historic and modern win-win principle won't make the grade for meeting the Ice Age challenge, which no one stands exempted from. The new ice age before us is not apocalyptic in nature. It only becomes so by default if we fail to make the grade. However, if we do make the grade and win, we create ourselves the brightest future ahead of us. So why should we fail? To fail is unthinkable. The winning has already begun. The winning is rooted in the universal love for one another as human beings, and its expression in the humanity in which we are one. We bring to each other our love, and let its power uplift the world. This is the highest form of the Westphalia principle, even a step beyond the win-win principle pioneered by China. With it, as one, we cannot fail. The one, unfolding silently, will shape the politics of the world. In due course, the ice planet reality will shape everything, even how we relate to one another. The ice planet future is real. The orientation towards it lays before us. The outcome can be a renaissance or an apocalypse. The present apparent movement is towards building an Ice Age renaissance. An ice planet renaissance is anti-apocalyptic in nature. Apocalyptic predictions invoke the capitulation of society to tales of catastrophes that humanity is said to be unable to avoid and unable to survive. such as predictions of asteroid impacts or planetoids colliding with the Earth, and so on. Other end-of-the-world apocalyptic myths are based on religious mysticism or nuclear war predictions or pseudoscience scares of imagined magnetic pole reversal consequences on the Earth, and so on and on. One of the latest pseudoscience apocalyptic scares is the prediction of the start of the next ice age to be resulting from man-made global warming that causes the melting of the Arctic ice sheet and subsequently of the Greenland ice sheet. It is theorized in this fantasy that the resulting meltwaters would reduce the salinity of the North Atlantic Ocean and thereby stop the Gulf Stream from flowing, with the effect that the cold of the Arctic would sweep southward and start a deep ice age that wipes entire countries off the map. This global warming ice age type of story is told in a 3-hour movie drama that ends with the United Kingdom ceasing to exist in a space of a few days as the climate change dumps tens of feet of snow onto the British Isles, with temperatures falling to 40 below. The evacuation of the 71 million people living in the UK becomes thereby impossible. The coming ice age cannot be apocalyptic in nature because its dynamics are recognizable well in advance. Its timing is scientifically predictable, its consequences are intelligently avoidable, its discovered science evidence can be measured, experienced, understood, and be replicated. The knowledge gained in science, gleaned from the evidence in physical phenomena, enables humanity to prepare itself well for the recognized consequences, and 'tis long before they happen. But what precisely do we need to prepare for? What defines an ice age or an ice planet? Can we meet the challenge? Can we understand it sufficiently to be effective, to prepare for it? The answer is simple. An ice age begins when the sun powers down to a low power state. That's a natural function in plasma flow physics with cosmic consequences. When this happens, the sun's surface temperature collapses from the current 5,800 degrees Kelvin to roughly 4,000 degrees. This means that 70% less solar energy is radiated by the sun. As a consequence, the Earth becomes a radically different world. It becomes, to a large degree, an ice planet. Snow and ice then cover our world from the poles all the way to the tropics. The phasing down of the sun will happen quickly, according to the principles involved, possibly within just a few days. The climate will respond to the reduced solar energy being radiated. It will respond relatively quickly. The areas outside the tropics become unsuitable thereby for human habitation. The tropics themselves become temperate and marginal for agriculture. It is existentially critical for humanity that the underlying ice age dynamics become understood, instead of being hidden as they presently are. If the ice planet dynamics are understood, civilization will be secure. In this case, humanity will prepare itself for the new world and live and prosper in it. If the ice planet dynamics are not understood, no preparations are made, whereby civilization ends when the phase shift happens, so that the existence of much of humanity ends with it, as the result of society having trapped itself into uninhabitable lands. That's the kind of scenario that the movie Ice 2020 illustrates. Should the ice planet dynamics become understood in the immediate future, the solutions become recognized scientifically and addressed technologically in the remaining span of time. This type of response renders an ice age as merely a challenge and nothing more than that. It becomes recognized in this case that with 70% less solar radiation being emitted by the sun, all areas outside the yellow band become technically unable to support human living. With this recognition, humanity would relocate itself into the yellow band. The necessary steps will then be taken. The project is technologically feasible. The Ice Planet Challenge is a large challenge, but one that can be met. This recognition that it can be met all by itself has the potential to inspire far-reaching actions and to prompt deep-reaching developments in society towards a future without fear. The knowing that we have the power to win the Ice Planet Challenge takes us far outside the dreamland of mystic predictions of impotence and submission to a predetermined fate. When society becomes awake scientifically, nothing is ever predetermined. No challenge, when it was scientifically understood, has ever defeated us in the past. We can only defeat ourselves by rejecting the challenge. But why should we? The scientific challenge that makes us creators and builders of an ice planet world isn't a great challenge at all. During the last 450 million years, only 3 major deep glaciation periods have occurred. The current glaciation period began some 50 million years ago and became progressively colder until in the modern period, the big ice ages began roughly 2 million years ago, termed the Pleistocene epoch. The Pleistocene epoch is also the time frame of the development of humanity. We may have seen dozens of ice ages on the path of our growing up. No doubt we met great challenges along this path. In later times, the Earth became an ice planet to a large extent during the glaciation periods. We came out of the last ice age as the 8th human species and the only one remaining. The rest didn't make the grade and perished in one of the many previous ice ages. Homo erectus was the longest lived of the human species, but it too became extinct. Homo erectus is believed to have had its beginning 1.9 million years ago and perished during the prolonged deep glaciation of the previous ice age that ended roughly 140,000 years ago. It is believed that the entire human species may have stood at the edge of extinction at this time, with some of the last remaining of humanity living at Pinnacle Point at the southern tip of Africa. Archaeology tells us that the entire human population appears to have dwindled in numbers from 10,000 to just a few hundred during the second half of the previous ice age, between 200,000 years ago and roughly 140,000 years ago. It is suggested that the whole of humanity may be offspring of this small remnant. It is interesting to note that humanity was largely an apocalyptic species until recent times, meaning that it had not developed the means previously to artificially create its own world, to supersede the diminishing natural world. The marginal success of the survivors at Pinnacle Point was not a created success. The survival had succeeded by the natural world bringing sufficient resources to the shores during even the harshest times, when the winter sea ice from Antarctica may have extended all the way to Africa. The image charts sea surface oxygen concentrations, which by being temperature sensitive can stand as a proxy for potential sea ice distributions during an ice age. The blue line would represent the maximum extent of winter sea ice and the green areas of summer sea ice. Both correspond with known extents during glaciation. The extended sea ice may have brought fish and sea mammals to the shores of Africa that saved humanity at the time from near extinction. This means that the rescue happened passively. Only in modern time, and for the first time ever, does the capability finally exist in humanity to actively create itself a new world as required. For the first time in the entire history of life on Earth has the scientific and technological capability been developed, and also the economic capability for humanity to create itself an artificial world that the harshest conditions on our ice planet cannot affect. This developed capability renders humanity an anti-apocalyptic species. Animals are apocalyptic in nature. When apocalyptic circumstances develop, animal species become extinct. They lack the power to create themselves a new world that the changing circumstances cannot affect. During the ice ages of the Pleistocene epoch, numerous species of large animals, over 40 kilograms in weight, became extinct, as if they had never existed. The specific reasons remain open to speculation, with climate change being the most likely cause. We ourselves came close to being extinct by the deep ice age climate effects of the previous ice age. We now have the capability to step away from the apocalyptic trap. We have the capability developed to create ourselves a new world in which we can survive the conditions of an ice planet and prosper therein, and to develop ourselves further. For example, we have the capability developed to create ourselves an artificial world afloat across the equatorial sea in grand style, with floating agriculture and thousands of floating cities surfaced by a world bridge spanning the oceans. Afloat on the ocean, flooding can't happen, droughts are not possible, earthquakes won't affect us. While such an extensive project has never been done before, or even been considered, we do have the capability for it at hand. And by having this capability, we are no longer doomed to massively perish as we had been repeatedly in previous times, as during the last ice age that we had emerged from with a mere 1 to 10 million world population. Yes, this minuscule world population was all that we had to our credit at the end of the last ice age, after more than 2 million years of growing up. Now we number 7 billion. The challenge that we face today is to maintain our 7 billion world population when the next glaciation phase begins in potentially the 2050s, or maybe sooner, and to advance us further still. We have the power to do this, but will we do it? We live in a dream world today in many respects, and may not wake up. Our climate is an anomaly, while we dream that it is normal. During the last 500,000 years of the modern glaciation epoch that we have ice samples for in the Antarctic ice sheet, 85% of the time had been terribly cold. That's the real normal climate. As I said before, during this time, so much ice gets piled up on land that the ocean surface gets lowered by 400 feet. Only during the remaining 15% of the last 500,000 years, between the glaciation periods, had the Earth experienced the time of warm climate anomaly that we presently experience, which is in the process of ending. Ice core samples of the Greenland ice sheet tell us that the difference between glacial conditions and interglacial conditions is enormously large, probably beyond what we can imagine. Since our civilization developed exclusively during the current interglacial period, that is itself a climate anomaly. No records exist of what had been experienced in prior times during the deep cold glacial climate, as we will experience again when the current interglacial holiday ends. In comparison with the Little Ice Age in the 1600s, which was roughly half a degree colder than the current global average temperature, we will experience a 20 degrees drop in temperature when the real ice age begins anew. And we will likely experience this deep cooling extremely fast as the sun reverts back to its low-powered state. In the illustration shown here, the historic startup of the previous ice age had been projected forward to our time to indicate what lays ahead. In the resulting comparison, the Little Ice Age barely shows up. The difference is that large. That's what we need to prepare ourselves for. The Greenland ice core records also tell us that enormously large and sharply changing climate oscillations have occurred during the last ice age, oscillating between deep glacial conditions and near interglacial conditions, in intervals of 1470 years. That the oscillations are not local anomalies, but are global phenomena, has been verified by comparing ice samples from widely separated areas on the Greenland ice sheet. The results from two of the diverse areas are shown overlaid here. The red graph is from a southern area on the Greenland ice sheet, and the blue graph from a drilling project further north. Nothing but the sun has the power to cause these extremely fast and enormously large climate fluctuations. The sun can do this by oscillating between its high-powered mode of operation and its low-powered glacial mode. With the sun being a sphere of plasma that is externally powered by interstellar plasma streams flowing into it, which are subject to cosmic fluctuations, the onset of the Ice Age conditions can be incurred extremely rapidly as flicking a switch. Our sun is a sphere of plasma that interacts with interstellar plasma. The interstellar plasma flows in streams that become electromagnetically self-aligned and compressed by magnetic fields. The compressing fields have been termed the primal fields. The primal fields are magnetic in nature. The magnetic fields form with the movement of plasma. The magnetic geometry that enables the fields to compress plasma around a sun requires a minimal rate of flow and plasma density. If the threshold rate is not met, the fields do not form. Inversely, if the plasma streams fall below a minimal threshold density, then the already operating fields collapse. In actual operation, our sun appears to be powered by multiple sets of nested electromagnetic primal fields. When the interstellar plasma density falls below the threshold that is required for all of the stages to operate, the most vulnerable of the stages can then no longer be maintained. It ceases to function. The result is that the sun falls back to a lesser energetic state, a type of default state. When this happens, ice ages begin on Earth. We are close to that. Our sun is currently in the high-powered mode. However, our sun is a mediocre star among stars, with a surface temperature of only 5,800 degrees Kelvin in its high-powered mode. Most of the stars in the galaxy operate in the 4,000 degrees range. The 4,000 degrees range appears to be a kind of default state. Even some supergiant stars operate in the 4,000 degrees range and below, like for example the star Witzsche, which operates at a surface temperature of only 3,300 degrees Kelvin. When our sun defaults to this low temperature stage in the range of 4,000 degrees, it will radiate 70% less energy. The large reduction has enormous effects, but it still enables life to exist in the tropics, where the exposure of the sun is the greatest. While the spectrum of the sunlight shifts slightly to the red, there is enough left for photosynthesis to continue. We are not at this low power point yet, but we may be in 30 years. When the transition happens, it likely happens in the space of hours or days. The transition begins from the moment when one of the sun's primal fields has collapsed. The collapse remains final when it happens. because it takes a large increase in interstellar plasma density flowing through the solar system for the collapsed primal fields to form anew. From the point on when the collapse of the primal fields happens, the full Ice Age glaciation state begins. The Earth becomes a different world then, typically for 100,000 years in duration. Most of the regions outside the tropics become covered with snow then, when the Ice Age begins, and be gripped with sub-zero temperatures. Canada, all the northern USA, Russia, Europe, northern India, and northern China all lose their agriculture and become uninhabitable to a large degree. The Earth becomes an ice planet then, with a green cumber band in the middle that's roughly 5,000 kilometers wide. Whether the affected nations will survive as nations depends on their ability to relocate themselves into the safe zone before the Ice Age begins, potentially to near the equator. For this, 6,000 new cities will be required, for 1 million people each, with new agricultures and new industries, mostly laid afloat across the equatorial seas. The populations that remained in the glacial zone would cease to exist. Large-scale rescue efforts are likely not possible under the then ensuing extreme global conditions. Nor would the people have a place to go to if the required new cities had not been built. Neither would the agriculture exist to nourish them if the new agriculture hadn't been created in the new world in the tropics. This doesn't mean that the Ice Age startup is apocalyptic in nature. When the dynamics of the operation of the solar system are understood, and the telltale evidence is scientifically recognized, it becomes easily possible for humanity to move with the dynamics of the universe and build itself the needed 6,000 new cities in the tropics that its relocation would require, together with the new agricultures and industries. For the lack of suitable land in the tropics, the new infrastructures would have to be placed afloat onto the equatorial seas, together with floating agricultures. All of this is possible. It can be created in the few decades that we have still left. In fact, it would be surprising if the new infrastructures would not be built, because the collapse of the solar system has already begun. The writing is on the wall. We know what is required. The weakening of the sun is already in progress. While the phase shift to the full Ice Age is still 30 years distant, the ongoing weakening of the sun has a wide range of fringe effects. When we learn to read the writing on the wall, the Ice Age challenge will be understood, and its urgency will be understood likewise. Then the building of the Ice Age infrastructures will begin without delay. The resulting projects will inspire an industrial revolution on a scale that has never before been imagined. Then the project to lay down a floating bridge spanning the oceans, with Africa becoming the center of the world, won't raise any eyebrows. It has been long proposed to build a land bridge to link the Eurasian and American continents across the top of the world via an undersea tunnel crossing the Bering Strait. While this project would bridge the shortest gap between the continents, it would be far too inefficient to be practical. It would be far more efficient in principle to build a floating bridge across the Pacific. The vastly longer bridge is more efficient because it can be built with automated industrial processes powered with high-temperature nuclear energy, utilizing basalt as a construction material. The floating bridge project would be more efficient because less human labor would be needed to build the project. Large-scale industrial automation makes this possible. By the new criterion, it would be actually more efficient to build the World Bridge project directly across the equator, where it would also serve as a backbone for floating agricultures and cities. No matter what the climate may bring, we need agriculture to survive, on which 99% of our living depends. We need agriculture to grow our food. We also need it to produce fodder for the animals that we presently need to eat to obtain the amino acids that plants don't readily provide. We need the animals because we need to eat them until more efficient means are developed to nourish ourselves without animal proteins in our diet. For this reason, we presently produce 20 billion chicken per year, 2 billion sheep, 1.5 billion cattle, and 1 billion pigs. We must provide food for all these animals as well. Their food, of course, originates largely with farming. All of this means that the entire farming infrastructure must be maintained throughout the Ice Age period and wherever possible and be invigorated. In order for all this to be possible, humanity must first of all maintain itself. This means that it must constantly develop itself. The Belt and Road Forum is a step in the direction of humanity maintaining its existence more efficiently. For this we need economic development, scientific development, technological development, and industrial development. The Belt and Road Initiative was designed as a stage to advance the urgently needed world development. It thereby pioneers a commitment that becomes ultimately absolutely required for meeting the Ice Age challenge. The economic world development that the Ice Age challenge demands must inspire a vast global industrial revolution on a scale that has never been experienced before. Without this revolution, the infrastructures for meeting the Ice Age challenge most likely cannot be built. The Ice Age World Bridge most likely cannot be built without a world economy that is so extensively developed that no more than 15% of it needs to be devoted to fulfilling the Ice Age preparation requirements. If more is drawn away from the economy for any purpose, the productive capacity of society would become cannibalized by the process. And that's not a path for building the future. The future can only be built on a wide platform of universal economic development. This is in essence what the Belt and Road Forum is designed to facilitate. The Belt and Road Initiative was put forward in 2013 by Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China. The proposal became reality. It inspired the world. President Xi Jinping and his spouse Peng Liyuan are shown here attending the gala closing event of the Belt and Road Forum on May 15, 2017, on the eve of that momentous achievement. The initiative became an invitation to the nations of Eurasia and beyond that of the world to work together, to pull together, to prosper together, to create a richer and more secure world for all. That's the path to the new world that the whole of humanity needs to learn to realize in the critical times ahead, because nothing less will be sufficient to create the broad-based Renaissance revolution that assures a future for mankind without fail. This means, simply put, that the key driver for the security of civilization and of humanity with it in the near Ice Age world must be to stage an economic revolution in the present with the required magnitude that it enables the needed new world for the coming Ice Age to be created in the normal flow of economic and cultural processes. China's Belt and Road Initiative provides with its commitment a valuable start for meeting the Ice Age requirement. Progress on this line means mutually empowered economics and the nations of the world becoming an integrated part of the global economic development process. Progress on this path also means no more war, absolutely, and no more looting of one another, and no more waste of the human potential. It means nuclear power development, cosmic energy development, automated industrial production, efficient transportation, universal health care, and free education and free housing for all humanity. While the world is presently far from reaching these goals, nevertheless these goals must be reached for an Ice Age Renaissance to become possible, and so they will be reached. The critical goals must also include uplifting culture, including classical culture. The needed Ice Age infrastructure cannot be built without a highly developed humanist platform as a foundation to build on. For this, advanced cultural developments are needed, and this too will happen because nothing less will do. Cultural pursuits have been a part of the human landscape for a very long time, if not from the very beginning, because cultural pursuits are intrinsically human pursuits. Our humanity had developed on this foundation from distant ages to the present. It may well be that without a rich cultural foundation, nothing great and profound and valuable will likely be realized. In this context, the building of secure places for living and large enough places for people to live and develop, and this with agriculture powerful enough to produce high-quality food, is a vital necessity for civilization to exist, and the most minimal platform for large-scale infrastructures to be built on, such as thousands of new cities, with many of them placed afloat on the oceans. Water has long played a vital role in the cultures of our civilizations. Living afloat on the seas was quite common in some historic cultures. Only the scale that is now required is new for meeting the larger challenge. In order for the new worldwide Renaissance revolution to happen efficiently on all fronts simultaneously, the human dimension needs also to aspire to the highest goals. As I said before, it must include free housing in the new cities and free education, free food and free health care. And these becoming the standard must be seen as a minimal investment by society into itself, because all of these components are necessary to protect and empower the most precious asset that a society has, which is itself. Whatever is required to meet this minimal standard must be created, and it can be created. With grand goals being aspired to, advanced energy development also becomes a minimal standard. We have come a long way on this path already. We have stepped away from burning wood for energy a long time ago. We have stepped up to coal and then oil and then nuclear power. Now the time has come to step up again to the fourth generation of nuclear power reactors that burn thorium as fuel. With the liquid-fueled thorium reactor, a single ton of thorium can deliver the energy equivalent of burning 3.5 million tons of coal. The technology to do this has been sitting on the shelf for 50 years already, unutilized, with a fuel supply of 1.8 million tons of the thorium sitting unused on the ground around the world. And this too, when it becomes implemented, would only be another start. In an energy-lean landscape we die. We die there as surely as we would die in a landscape without culture, in a world without music, art, literature, poetry, song, dialogues, and so on. And the utilization of cosmic energy, the resource that powers the sun, promises an even larger and still more efficient energy supply than the most advanced nuclear power reactor is able to. We have the power to create and utilize all of these resources, and more than those. We only lose this power when we close our mind to what we already have, and are, and have discovered. When we close our mind, then the coming ice age becomes apocalyptic in nature, because then small-minded thinking will keep our vision obscured, so that the coming ice age will not even be recognized, much less be prepared for. Since this is the present state of the world and of what we call science, we live in an extremely dangerous world right now that is vastly apocalyptic by choice, as a consequence of society's self-made blindness that no one seems committed to heal. In this respect, when seen from this standpoint of the mental poverty that is perpetrated today, the ending of the movie Ice 2020 is closer to the mark than anyone might imagine. In the movie, only 4 people were seen surviving, marching south from a country of 71 million, symbolically. If humanity doesn't wake up soon, the silent fate of the 71 million in the movie becomes our destiny. In its sad irony, the movie is truthful. It illustrates the blindness that makes our world presently apocalyptic. The movie is focused on the apocalyptic global warming doctrine and an apocalyptic anthropic energy myth with built-in resource depletion. It is also a movie of science denial and denial of the very universe in which we live. It is a movie that conveys a vision of the cultivated blindness in the world that is a blindness to the creative and productive power of the human being, by which the leading edge of life on earth is defined. Fortunately, the grand denial of reality is in the process of ending. This ending that draws to a close the small-minded world is built into the dynamics of the Ice Age transition. The key factor in this arena is the tiniest cosmic factor in physical terms. This factor is the solar cosmic ray flux. Solar cosmic rays are not rays in the standard sense, like rays of light. They are single events of fast-moving protons and electrons, escaping from the plasma fusion cells on the surface of the Sun. Protons are 100,000 times smaller than the smallest atom, and the electrons are 1,000 times smaller than that. They are the building blocks that all the atoms in the universe are synthesized of. Not all plasma particles, though, are bound together into atoms in this energetic synthesis on the surface of the Sun. Some escape in extremely energized form. These tiny carriers of an electric potential, when they encounter the Earth, have an enormous effect on the Earth's atmosphere. Their electric potential ionizes the atmosphere, which enhances the cloud-forming process up to 100-fold. Increased cloudiness reflects a larger portion of the solar radiation back into space, which makes the Earth colder. The enhanced cloud forming also increases rainfall, causing floods, increased hurricanes, and also droughts in the area where the faster rain-out reduces the water transport distance of the clouds. Nothing affects the climate on Earth more strongly than these tiny particles flowing from the Sun, which are themselves too small to be visible. They can cause droughts, floods, freezing, storms, crop losses, and even affect hurricanes. The only effect that these tiny particles cannot cause on the Earth is an ice age. The ice ages are caused by a different consequence of the weakening of the solar system. Ice ages begin when the solar system diminishes below a threshold level at which a set of its primal fields collapse. All the cosmic effects prior to the phase shift are fringe effects. The fringe effects are brought about almost exclusively by changing solar cosmic ray flux. The solar cosmic rays impacting the Earth cause a very wide range of secondary effects expressed as climate cooling, climate fluctuations, increased cloudiness, flooding, droughts, storms, and so on. These fringe effects can have devastating consequences, and do so in many cases. We see them as mega floods, crop losses, crop failures, deadly storms, scorching droughts, killer frosts. All of these climate effects are caused by changing volumes of cosmic ray events. Their increasing magnitude can be seen to indicate that we are getting close to the big one, to the actual Ice Age startup phase shift. With vigorous scientific tracking of the magnitude of these fringe effects, it becomes possible to determine the timing when the Ice Age phase shift is likely to occur. The underlying weakening of the solar system began roughly 3,500 years ago. That's when the big climate pulses that are discovered in ice cores from the Greenland ice sheet began to diminish. If one projects the rate of diminishment forward, it crosses the zero line in our time. The diminishing solar activity can also be traced with carbon-14 ratios in historic samples, which reflect changing volumes of cosmic ray events and therefore stand as a proxy measurement for solar activity. These measurements tell us that a long-term solar downtrend occurred till the end of the 1600s. This trend was interrupted and reversed by one of the big warming pulses that occur in long intervals. It recovered the sun and gave us almost 300 years of global warming. Then in the late 1990s, the big recovery pulse for the sun had spent its load. We saw the collapse of the solar system beginning anew, dropping like a stone towards its underlying background that is also diminished. This modern collapse can no longer be tracked with carbon-14 ratios since the nuclear bombing and testing in the 1950s and 60s added a second source for carbon-14 to the atmosphere. However, with the dawn of the space age, it becomes possible to track the diminishing solar wind pressure in space around the sun. The measurements for that were provided by the Ulysses spacecraft of NASA and ESO. The spacecraft measured the solar wind pressure and saw it diminishing at a rate of 30% in a 10-year period. At this rate, the solar wind will reach the zero mark in the 2030s. The sunspot cycles, which are similarly diminishing, will reach the zero level likewise in the 2030s. The solar wind is comparable to steam boiling off from a kettle. When the heat under the kettle diminishes, the steam diminishes, then stops. Thereafter the water cools. In cosmic terms, after the solar system diminishes, to the point that the solar wind stops. The continued weakening of the system will cause the solar surface temperature to diminish. Eventually, the threshold will be crossed when a set of the sun's primal fields collapses, whereby the Ice Age begins. This will likely happen in the 2050s, but may also happen sooner. On this path of our solar diminishing, the solar cosmic ray flux continues to increase, and with it, the resulting fringe effects increase, such as increased cloudiness, flooding, droughts, storms, freezing, with ever more devastating effects on agriculture and human living. The increasing magnitude of the fringe effects is a part of the writing on the wall that tells us that the Ice Age phase shift is near. The solar cosmic ray volume is increasing with the weakening of the solar system. The resulting fringe effects are likewise increasing at such a fast rate that they soon can no longer be ignored. For how much longer humanity continues to turn its back to the voice of its science, and thereby to the already large volume of evidence that the Earth is on the cosmic path of becoming an ice planet in the near future, which is too trying to contemplate, will determine humanity's fitness to continue to exist on the Earth. This affects all nations. None are not affected. The challenge is not trivial, nor are the consequences. We, humanity, cannot afford to turn our back to the astrophysical dynamics that we have discovered in so many ways, because when the Ice Age phase shift happens, potentially in the 2050s, Canada loses all of its territory to the snow and ice and becomes an uninhabitable land for 100,000 years. While the glaciation cannot be avoided, the loss of Canada can be prevented by the nation creating a new territory for its living, spread across the equatorial sea, where the glaciation cannot reach it. Canada is not a land, it is a people. Russia faces the same challenge to not turn its back to its future. In fact, humanity as a whole cannot afford the loss should Russia continue to turn its back to its responsibility to maintain its future. Europe is on the same track to become lost as if it had never existed, while it has the power at hand to avoid this fate. While India, China, and the USA will lose only a part of their territory to the Ice Age snow and ice, they too cannot survive the loss without these nations creating new worlds for their living, far from the ice, cradled under the strongest sunshine. Our planet is changing. Should we open our eyes and face its reality honestly, preferably today, and move with the knowledge that science lays before us, and then build ourselves new worlds in the changing landscape of the Earth, we will have passed the test and live. If not, well, that's unthinkable. Our world is changing with the changing sun. It's affecting us already in the present. It affects us via its changing cosmic ray flux. The changing volume of cosmic ray flux has the potential to affect us enormously, and is already affecting us in many ways. Most of the cosmic ray flux from the sun becomes trapped in the plasma shell that surrounds the sun, which is often referred to as the solar corona. However, as the sun becomes weaker, which means that its corona becomes less dense, increasingly larger volumes of cosmic ray events penetrate the corona that stands as a barrier against them, which is getting weaker. Further along this line, it has recently been discovered that the corona shell around the sun is not uniform in density, but has weak areas developing. The weak areas are visible when the sun is observed in the ultraviolet spectrum of light. Atoms emit light by being energized to varying degrees by the prevailing plasma density and the rate of the plasma flow. Weak areas in the corona show up as areas of lower light intensity. The weak areas are referred to as coronal holes. Thus, when holes form in the corona, larger portions of the solar cosmic ray flux are able to escape the sun and to reach the Earth. When the solar cosmic rays penetrate the Earth's atmosphere, they affect cloudiness and thereby the climate. The cosmic ray events also affect us directly on the surface with their electric effects. Researchers have discovered that each of us encounters roughly 50,000 cosmic ray intrusions per day. With the cosmic ray particles being 100,000 times smaller than the smallest atoms, they typically flow right through the human body without colliding with anything. However, with the particles being electrically charged, their movement through the body creates minute electric currents by induction. These electric inductions appear to have a beneficial effect on the body's neurological system, which functions electrically. This includes our complex cognitive functions. All this means that increasing cognitive ability is one of the fringe effects of the weakening of the sun towards the next ice age. It appears that we need the cosmic ray nourishment that flows richly through the ice ages, which we see already increasing again before the ice age even starts. In other words, the ice ages might be more beneficial to us in the overall context of our development than we may realize. It may well be that we owe our very development as human beings to this underlying cosmic conditioning during the ice ages. Archaeology tells us that the entire development of humanity occurred in the time frame of the current glaciation period, termed the Pleistocene epoch, which began roughly 2 million years ago and unfolded as a long sequence of countless ice ages. We appear to be the children of the ice ages for the simple reason that the cosmic conditioning for the complex neurological development, such as we have achieved, didn't exist in earlier time going back more than 400 million years. This means that we are the crowning achievements of the development of life on Earth, second to none. This also means that we are about to take another leap forward, considering that the next neurological rich period has already begun. The solar cosmic reflux has been increasing from about 1998 on. This rate of increase has been measured at 20% over 10 years. The rate of increase appears to be increasing itself with the weakening of the sun. It may well be that the resulting beneficial effects of the weakening of the sun towards the next ice age outweigh the destructive climate effects brought on by the cosmic ray interaction, from floods to droughts and so on. It is interesting to note in this context that the great achievements in civilization were wrought in cold periods of the interglacial climate, which are periods of a weaker sun where larger volumes of solar cosmic ray flux occur. The dawn of written languages that uplifted the face of civilization tremendously had occurred in one of these cold periods. The dawn of Christianity and later the Golden Renaissance likewise occurred in one of these cold periods. Inversely, the periods of war and destruction occurred during the warm periods, when the cosmic ray flux would have been low. These cosmic ray lean periods gave us the Roman collapse into fascism that nearly destroyed civilization, followed in later times by the fascist madness of the Dark Ages and World War. The same relationship also holds true for the more recent historic times. The cold period of the Maunder Minimum in the 1600s, a period of very high volumes of cosmic ray flux, was a period of great cultural achievements, one of the greatest in history. It was the period of Johannes Kepler, who is credited with having laid the foundation for modern science. The 1600s period of high rates of solar cosmic ray flux also gave us the Peace of Westphalia that ended 100 years of war and established a type of universal constitution for civilization that still stands today in principle. The period also gave us some of the greatest musical geniuses in classical culture, whose work still stands as benchmarks for musical power, beginning with Haydn, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, and so on. Inversely, the modern warm period, a period of low volumes of cosmic ray flux, became the worst fascist period in history, the period of 2 world wars and of the utter madness of the nuclear-armed Cold War. We seem to be breaking away from this history as we move closer towards the next phase shift to the new ice age. The dramatic weakening of the sun that has begun towards the next ice age, with its corresponding dramatic increase in cosmic ray flux, may have opened up new opportunities in our self-development as human beings to reach higher than ever before. If this is the case, we may not have seen anything yet in terms of what our creative and productive efforts can achieve. China's Belt and Road Initiative was not designed to reach as high as is actually required, but it got us out of the starting gate. The Belt and Road World Development Forum may be seen as a pinnacle achievement, But in terms of potential achievements, we are seeing just the beginning of, with a lot more yet to come. It appears that a movement has begun across the entire front of civilization, with a momentum that will change the world. The train towards a new renaissance is out of the station. We haven't seen anything yet. The train is rolling. The conventions that rolled the past can no longer hinder us or hold us back. If this isn't cultural optimism, what is? On this now rolling train, the critical Ice Age preparations are bound to happen in due course along the path of building a new world, forever more secure and richer human living. We see large-scale international development efforts presently unfolding from China in cooperation with Russia, spreading throughout Asia into Africa, India, and South America. The age of freedom towards the boundless seems to be dawning, which inherently includes freedom from empire and freedom to pursue scientific and technological progress with unlimited economic development in the wings, intertwined with space exploration. It is unknown if the leadership of China is aware of the Ice Age challenge before humanity and is moving towards meeting the challenge. It is possible that the logo for the 2016 G20 meeting that convened in China may symbolize that China is aware of the challenge. The symbol can be seen to represent a stream of plasma flowing around a sun. If so, the symbol can be seen as a recognition that the sun is not its own master and is thereby subject to radical change towards Ice Age conditions of the type that the Ulysses spacecraft has already seen the beginning of. If the G20 symbol signifies this recognition, it is possible that China is saying with it to the world that it is aware of the greatest challenge in the entire history of humanity, which lies before the world, that it is aiming to meet this challenge. No greater challenge is imaginable than that of preparing the world for the coming phase shift by which Canada, Europe, Russia, and parts of India and China too, and the USA become uninhabitable, which consequently need to relocate their populations into the tropics before the phase shift happens in potentially 30 years. The plasma flow symbolism that the G20 logo may represent appears vaguely repeated in the background image in the flow of the Belt and Road Gala performances. It appears that the Belt and Road project flows on the same white front, with implications that have not yet been discovered. It appears that China may be saying to the world, let's join hands on this one and meet the challenge together that no one can meet alone. China may also be saying to the world, with its symbolism in the gala performances, look, the ice planet Earth will be our home in the near future. Let's pull together on this front and turn the challenge into the greatest economic miracle of all times, since the challenge cannot be avoided by any means, but can be won. It is also possible in the context of what had been set in motion by the dynamics of the universe itself in terms of increased cosmic reactions, that the critical recognition of the Ice Age challenge will be made worldwide without anyone having to drive the process, so that the massive task of building the new Ice Age world will unfold naturally and universally in a matter-of-fact fashion, as if it was the most natural thing to do, so that the Belt and Road Initiative is itself merely a leading element on this front of progress. This type of vast and rapid progress seems to be almost assured when one recognizes that we will likely experience a 20 to 30-fold increase in solar cosmic reflux in the near future, as the Sun continues to weaken towards the point at which the solar winds stop, according to what the Ulysses spacecraft had measured the first faint beginning of. How great the increase will likely be has recently been illustrated by the researcher Simon Schnoll, who had conducted several types of chemical reaction experiments, repeated identically for long periods. The researcher discovered that the reaction rate had peaked occasionally, and that the peaks occurred in 24-hour intervals, respective of the rotation of the Earth, and that successive peaks were progressively smaller. The measured results reflect, in principle, what one would expect to see as the effect of large volumes of cosmic reflux flowing through a coronal hole on the Sun that is aligned towards the Earth, which would be slowly rotating away from the Earth over successive days by the rotation of the Sun. The enormous increase that was measured during the time of the large spike, in comparison with the low-level background that is also shown, tells us that we can expect to see an enormous increase in cosmic reflux happening across the entire face of the Sun as the Sun weakens increasingly towards the point when the solar wind pressure diminishes to zero. We will likely see a 50-fold increase in solar cosmic reflux over the next 30 years, with corresponding effects on the neurological capacity of humanity. We may be standing at the threshold of a major upwards phase shift of the human cognitive capacity, a phase shift towards a new age of genius and humanity's creative and productive capability. Even at the still early stage of the Ice Age transition at the present time, some rather amazing changes have already occurred on the face of the Sun. The change that is shown here was photographed by the SDO satellite with the same camera, spaced 16 months apart. If one considers that the Sun will continue to weaken for the next 30 years, then the cosmic ray increase that Simon Schnoll had measured as a large spike may become the normal background. What we see here unfolding seems to promise a rate of cultural development on the face of the Earth that has never been experienced in all the known history, surpassing even the environment in which Kepler, Beethoven, and the Peace of Westphalia developed. These are not trivial factors. When they begin to enrich civilization, empires end. The radically brighter future that the now unfolding cosmophysical factors bring into view is hard to imagine in the context of schooled assumptions that we judge our world against, but which are fundamentally wrong, and perhaps intentionally so, in order to shape society's responses and to protect the status quo. Science itself is much hampered by the process of building on and protecting false assumptions. The ice ages are obscured by this convention, which leads to dangerous conclusions, and so are historic false assumptions, which, when corrected, open up a whole new world of liberty. The liberty of the truth can even affect the way we see our history. The dating of historic events by means of measuring the rate of decay of radioactive carbon-14 in samples from historic times give us inherently incorrect results for samples from the glaciation period. The process of radiocarbon dating operates on the assumption that the carbon-14 ratios in the air were the same throughout all times, as they were in the year 2000. This is based on the theory that the sun does not change. Since such a sun that doesn't change doesn't exist, and in the real world, the cosmic ray flux is dramatically changing with the weakening of the sun towards the next ice age. The carbon-14 ratios in the air are likewise changing. Carbon-14 is produced by solar cosmic ray flux interacting with the atmosphere. Since experimental evidence tells us that the cosmic ray flux can increase by a factor of 50 or more as we get into the glaciation stage, all the dating results from the Ice Age periods are necessarily wrong, and so are the perceptions of history based on them. An honest scientific recognition of the real nature of the sun can change all that, and with it, it can also liberate the way we regard our future and our prospects in the future. The scientifically discovered solar dynamics tell us that the coming ice age, when it starts in the 2050s or sooner, will not become an apocalyptic experience in which civilization dies, but will instead be a Renaissance experience in which civilization blooms. Thus, the scientifically liberated recognition of the universe and of ourselves promises the most far-reaching Renaissance experiences beyond anything that has ever been imagined. And this will begin to happen long before the Ice Age even starts. When science becomes liberated, and evidence suggests that it will, we will see a whole new world of cultural optimism unfolding, and with it the power to create a new world. War will be forgotten in this sunshine. In like manner will terror, fascism, looting, poverty, and slavery be purged from the landscape. We have lived under the nuclear war terror threat for 70 years already, with no end in sight and no end likely possible on a political platform. But with the cosmophysical factor into the Ice Age dynamics, the age of the nuclear bomb will finally be put to rest. Bombs are oddly out of place when the task is to create a powerful new human world beyond the stage of doom on a planet of ice and a dimmer sun. Progressive change is not driven by the world's leaders. Instead, the leaders are driven by progressive cosmic change, the change that affects humanity universally. In the resulting new world, our children will not learn the empire songs of war anymore, and songs of greed-based economics, narcotic terrorism, or the glory of dope-based self-destruction. Instead, a new chorus will be heard with songs of the recognition of a full-orbed future, rising confidently, powerfully, and advancing from the richest traditions, cultures, and discoveries. With this we face the Ice Age future with joy, and us becoming enriched by it with the cognitive boost that enables the most far-reaching development of our planet in a dynamic Renaissance world that we have the power to create, regardless of how much ice may accumulate in due course on the face of the earth, and how much of its face the ice may cover over. We are the miracle of life on this planet, all of us together, and also the miracle makers. We stand at a breakout point today from the dream times into the stage of a new awakening world. In this, we, humanity, stand hand in hand with our children and for our children, as theirs will be the world that we now build. And theirs too will be the new age in which we discover together in the process of building and creating and discovering what it means to be human. Like seeds are we, wind-blown, carriers of a secret still unknown, poems in the woods of nature, sentinels of an intelligence yet unseen, prophets of the enduring, apostles in an endless landscape. Harvest is seed time, thoughts ripening, carried as by a great wind, carriers of secrets to unfold, thoughts winged with purpose, a force waiting, silent, patiently waiting for the moment. Thoughts do awaken, aroused by the moist warmth of spring, cascades of colors, colors of life, bright yellows, bursts of silver white, thoughts becoming creations, monuments of genius, builders of worlds. Who owns the seeds? Do we? Who can fathom the wonder? Life flows from them in great rivers, rivers trailing into oceans. In them we are alone. Each one is alone. Each thought is sovereign. Beauty is its song. Thoughts are seeds becoming ideas, a life in discovering, a life in listening, a life in being touched by love, a life in loving, a life. Like seeds, thoughts fall to the ground, potentials are lost, hard grounds kill the precious, but we are men. Hard ground becomes tilled, watered, the precious is nurtured in loving. Love for one another, the human spring. Mankind is afloat in a sea that is love. Seeds germinate, become plants, roots break the ground, love lifts the barriers, patiently, silently waiting, reaching for the sky. Thoughts are the universe unfolding, landscapes of brilliance, ideas of power, substance for enriching one another, substance of the forever maturing, thoughts bearing new seeds within, seeds for splendors beyond dreams. Each harvest is seed time. A seed becomes a plant bearing new seeds. A thought unfolding bears up civilization. A spark in the heart bears the fire of life. New worlds are created in the fire of passion. We are the bearers of a fire that is light. Builders of worlds are we, new worlds which have never been, precious with riches grander than our own. Nature is love reflected in loving. Love paints the colors of its endless spring. Love paints us all, but who owns the seed? Who owns the cradle for the seed? Name it intelligence. Name it the universe. Thoughts are seeds from an infinite fountain, monuments of grandeur of good, fields of flowers dancing in the sunshine. All nature whispers this to us. The melody of nature, what a song! Whispers of a splendor grander than the heavens. Like seeds are we whisper too, seeds bearing gifts for the world, gifts wrapped up in sunshine. Gems are we unfolding a majestic song. Listen to the song, listen to the heart, listen to the silence where strands of love unfold. Listen to the symphony of our humanity. In this symphony we are one, one with the universe itself.